Hello there, Ben Bowers, the Spirit Specialist, and I am here today to talk to you about Amaretto because I have two bottles in the shop which I think are absolutely fantastic. But it got me thinking, do people really know what Amaretto is? And if I'm going to talk about the two that I sell in the shop, which are the Tossalini Salizza Amaretto and the relatively new Adriatico Amaretto, why don't we compare it against basically the market leader? So what I also have is, and I'll put these on the shelf so I don't drop them, I also have a miniature, particularly purchased for this video, of Amaretto DiSaronno, or as it's now known, DiSaronno Originale. It was known as Amaretto DiSaronno. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some background information about these two, and then we'll do a taste test against DiSaronno, because when you say Amaretto, this is what people think about. It's a miniature, so that's not full size, that's close up to the camera, this is far away, but it will give me enough in that bottle for me to be able to try it side by side against these two that I sell. Because, you know, are these actually that much better than this, which sells absolutely bucket loads? But what I'm going to do first, and then I'll move into the background information behind the Tossalini and the Adriatico, is, and this is something that I've been thinking about doing as a sort of a series of videos about the actual category, the drink itself. So this is technically the first, and I'll probably kind of cut it out and put it in a separate video. But essentially I'm going to ask the question and then answer it, hopefully. What even is Amaretto anyway? Amaretto takes its name from the Italian word amaro, meaning bitter, with the suffix etto added to then expand to a little bitter. Commonly described as an almond liqueur, most Amaretto brands don't actually use almonds, instead using oil from apricot kernels alongside burnt sugar caramel and a variety of spices for the bulk of the flavour, although almonds are sometimes used. Why? Because while the flavour profile is extremely similar, the costs of production are much lower when using apricot kernels, as almonds themselves are pretty damn expensive. The history and creation of Amaretto is muddied by the claims of two families. Legend has it that Amaretto was created by a model of the artist Bernardino Luini, a former pupil of Leonardo da Vinci, who was commissioned by the Basilica of Santa Maria delle Grazie in the northern city of Saronno in 1525. His fresco, The Adoration of the Magi, included an image of the Madonna of the Miracles, and Bernardino used a widowed young innkeeper as his model. As thanks for being his model, she gave him a gift of an amber liqueur made by steeping apricot kernels in brandy, possibly as a potion to make him fall in love with her, as they eventually became lovers and married. A century later, Giovanni Reina discovered the original recipe for the liqueur and passed the secret formula down through generations of the Reina family, until Domenico Reina produced it on a larger scale, selling it from his grocery store in the centre of Saronno at the start of the 20th century. The Reina family continued to run the parent company for what is now known as DiSaronno Originale. However, the Lazzaroni family strongly dispute this legend, instead claiming the liqueur was actually created by them in 1851, when they macerated their almond-flavoured cookies in a base spirit to create a sweet liquid, a process they continue to do to this day. Apricot kernels contain poisonous hydrogen cyanide compounds, so the pits are steeped in alcohol to draw out the flavourful oils without also extracting the toxic elements, with cold pressing taking place to protect the oil from heat and maintaining its quality. Botanicals such as vanilla and sweet spices are added to the liquid to add complexity, and burnt sugar caramel increases the sweet notes and adds colour. Beppe Tossalini is named after Giuseppe Tossalini, who in 1943 began to distill high-quality grappa, a spirit which had previously been treated as a crude, rough spirit distilled from the leftover waste of winemaking. Now in the third generation of family ownership and based near the Slovenian border, Tossalini has expanded to produce a wide range of grappas, brandies and liqueurs. Salizza is named after a small alleyway in Venice near Piazza San Marco, where there rests a red stone in the shape of a heart. Legend has it that when lovers touch it, they will remain in love forever. Salizza is made from crushed almonds infused in alcohol and redistilled, before more base alcohol, sugar and caramel are added. There are no other additions, with the exception of a small amount of Tossalini's own aged brandy to add depth and complexity. It's bottled at 28% ABV. Produced in Puglia, known as the heel of Italy, Adriatico is a relatively new brand of Amaretto, launched in 2008 by Jean-Robert Belanger, who had previously worked for Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy and Red Bull before branching out in inspiration of his mother's homemade tiramisu. This is another Amaretto made from almonds, in this case Filippo Cea almonds hand-picked and oven-roasted before being macerated and distilled in a neutral base spirit. The distillate is then infused with vanilla, cinnamon, cocoa, a pinch of coffee and another pinch of sea salt from the Adriatic Sea which surrounds Puglia. Cane sugar is added to sweeten, but at half the level at which most other Amarettos will tend to use. It's bottled at 28% ABV. So there we go, that is Amaretto. So commonly known as an almond liqueur, but due to cost of production, technically not. But according to everything that I've read up in terms of the Seltzer and the Adriatico, they are almond based, whereas DiSaronno is apricot kernels. They all use the burnt sugar caramel to get the colour, to get that sweetness. But this is apricot kernel based, where these are almond based as well. So I have DiSaronno, I have the Seltzer. So let me make sure that I get these in here. So DiSaronno Originale is 28%. I'm going to put the lid back on there. So this is going to be probably the boring bit of the video that I should have done before. I've not even started drinking yet. It's quite early. I say it's quite early in the morning. It's 9:30 in the morning, and here's me about to do 3 Amarettos. So DiSaronno Originale is 28%. Seltzer Amaretto Veneziano, because this is essentially not based on Venice, but you know, in homage, honor of Venice, is 28%. And then the Adriatico Amaretto is also 28%. So we're all on 28%, so that's handy, because then we don't have to talk about, oh, you know, this one's a little bit stronger and everything like that. Adriatico also do a, they call it Adriatico Blanco, and it's essentially like a cream liqueur, almost like a milk liqueur, and it's using almond milk. So the miniatures, I have the miniatures available for sale for Adriatico, are the same as the big bottle, which I think, to be honest, it was the bottle that caught my eye. I thought, oh, that looks really nice. See if I can get a sample of it. Got sent a sample and was really, really impressed with it, which is why I've got it in the shop. I haven't really had any other Amarettos because I think the Seltzer is absolutely amazing, and it was almost like, what's the point? You know, this is one of the best Amarettos that I've come across, but this is different enough that I'm happy to have both of these on the shelf. But how does it compare to DiSaronno? Because everybody knows DiSaronno. Everybody drinks DiSaronno. I don't have any Lazzaroni, which is the Amaretto that's made from the infusion of the cookies. I was thinking about buying a bottle in, literally just to do this video. What I might do is maybe get hold of another bottle for a later one, because what I know what's going to happen is there's probably going to be some people that watch this and go, oh, why haven't you had this one? Oh, this Amaretto is absolutely brilliant. This is far better than all of them. I think goes, yeah, there's quite a lot of Amarettos out there. Considering, so it was the second biggest selling liqueur in about the 60s. It was absolutely massive, and then it took a massive downturn. So DiSaronno is massively popular, but Amaretto as a as a category, I just cannot get my words out today. As a category is really kind of like, everybody associates it with being sickly sweet, tiramisu, coffee, all that sort of thing. DiSaronno kind of got it locked down, and nobody really looks at any other Amaretto. It's starting to come back into fashion through cocktails. So Amaretto sours, Godfathers, that sort of thing. I really like a Godfather, which is cognac and Amaretto essentially equal parts, but I kind of like playing around. But then there's, I can never remember which is which. There's like a godmother and a godson and a goddaughter and all this lot. It's essentially another spirit with Amaretto. So it works really well with rye whiskey in particular, Scotch whiskey, depending on what you do with it. It's essentially a base spirit and Amaretto, equal parts. Really, really nice cocktail. But the Godfather is cognac and Amaretto. So cocktails are starting to bring Amaretto to the fore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with, and I've got them lined up here next to their bottles, I'm going to start with the DiSaronno then the Salizza, then the Adriatico, and then I'm going to go back to the DiSaronno to see how it compares having had the two. And this is something that I'd like to do kind of moving forward as another potential series of videos, is look at the market leader, the one that dominates the market, and compare it directly side by side with, I don't know what you call them, premium versions, you know, super premium in some of these marketing nonsense, but what I would consider better versions, but kind of do a direct side by side and go, what is it? Is it any better? And if it is, why? And do it side by side, because it's all well and good me going, oh, you know, this vodka is better than Smirnoff. Let's prove it. Let's do it side by side. So this is DiSaronno Amaretto, all at room temperature. Now, quite a few places will say, oh, you've got to have it chilled, you've got to have it with ice, everything like that. The problem with having it chilled, the problem, and particularly with having it ice, is you are, with chilling it, taking away potentially some of the complexity that's in there. I could do it chilled as well if I really wanted to go properly scientific. I don't really want to put ice in it because you're then diluting it down and everything like that. Most people will have probably DiSaronno over cubes of ice. Fine, not a problem. You know, put the bottle in the freezer, pour it from there if you want it chilled, because then you're not getting the dilution. But I want to try these at room temperature equally the same. So, room temperature DiSaronno. On the nose, straight away marzipan. Absolutely marzipan. But then, ooh, underlying, as you take a bit of a deeper sniff, and as you allow more to come into your nose, there's just a hint of like acetate, nail polish remover, just underlying. If you take a gentle nose and you go, oh yeah, that's marzipan. But if you just take a little bit longer, that marzipan, sweet almondy marzipan, kind of like the pale yellow marzipan, that disappears quite quickly. And it's replaced with quite an acrid, real sharp acetate nail polish remover note that is a bit unpleasant, to be perfectly honest. And maybe chilling it is going to knock off that very kind of almost neutral grain alcohol burniness that's there. It's not overpowering, but I'm definitely getting a feel of nail polish remover. Okay, so now don't forget, with Amaretto, we are a little bitter. So technically Amaretto shouldn't be that sweet. We are wanting, just by the definition, the word that it's called, we are wanting some bitterness to come through as well. Now we've got bitterness on the nose, but it's a very acrid bitterness. It's a very sharp, pure alcohol bitterness. Okay. Straight away on the palate, I get sugar, almost like a sugar solution. I'm really, really struggling to find that marzipan feel that's there on the nose. And I think the marzipan note that's on the nose is kind of accentuated by that acetatey note that's on there, which you can't really taste. It's very light. I'm really struggling to find much of what you would want that almondy note, even though it is pretty apparent this is the apricot kernels. There's not a lot to it at all. There really is barely anything going on. It's light, it's sweet, it's sugary, but I'm not getting what I would hope for in terms of much of a almond note, much of a marzipan note, that sort of feel. There's a little bit of a kick at the back of the throat, but really not that much at all. Now, I don't have any water to cleanse the palate in between. So there are going to be some people going, oh, well, you're not doing it properly. And I get that, but partly the reason for me not having any water is I'm hoping that doing side by side, but almost directly side by side, will actually accentuate the differences between them. maybe more in a texture thing as well. So I've got a little bit of the DiSaronno to go back to, because it'll be interesting to go back to it after that. But up front, initially, on its own, it doesn't feel like there's a lot there. I'm really struggling to get any type of almondy, marzipan-y note coming through. It's just very sweet. It's like drinking, it's almost like drinking sugar syrup from a cocktail bottle. I'm looking at the Giffard cane syrup that's there, that you would use as your sugar solution for making cocktails, with maybe a little drop of orgeat syrup that's been put in there. But there's not a lot going on there at all. Right, so let's look at the Selitza. Now here is a lot fruitier. Do you know what this reminds me of on the nose almost straight away? Is Stollen cake. So Stollen cake, if you're not aware, very much a Christmassy thing. It's like a kind of a light fruit cake that should have essentially a roll. So it looks a bit like a ciabatta loaf. It's kind of that shape, but I think it's German originally. And it's essentially a lightly spiced fruit cake. Not a huge amount of fruit in. It's not one of these dark fruit cakes. But you should then have essentially like a tube of marzipan right through the middle of it. So it's like marzipan and light fruit and light spices. And this really reminds me of a Stollen cake. It's got a fruitier note to it as well. Now there is that bitter note. There is a bitter edge on it, but it doesn't nose like nail polish remover. It doesn't nose like acetate. There is a sharper note in the background, but the fruit, the marzipan, is very forward. Again, that sharper note is underneath, but this is more of a bitter nuts, kind of like nut shells almost. It's there and it lifts the flavors, but it's not replacing as it did with the DiSaronno. And there's a slight touch of citrus in there as well. And that citrus carries on onto the palate. And the texture, this is so much thicker. There's a rich, thick, this feels like a liqueur. The DiSaronno felt like it was slightly watered down. And there's a lot going on in here. Initially, I got a little hint of lemon zest and orange zest. There is a nuttiness, a definite nuttiness, and it's not marzipan almonds, it's actual almonds. Beautiful sweetness in there as well, but it's that rich texture. It could become cloying. I'm getting now a little bit of dark chocolate. Again, that fruitiness. And the nuttiness is not up front. This isn't like liquefied marzipan, but there's so much more going on in here. And it's all to do with that texture. It's pulling flavors out of that rich, thick, almost chewy texture. I do get lemon zest initially as it hits the tongue. Then that marzipan-y feel comes in, but you get sultanas, you get raisins, you get light spiced. It's not liquidized marzipan, it's a liquidized Stollen cake. There's lots going on in here. It's a Stollen cake that's got kind of like candied peel in, as well as sultanas, as well as that thick tube of marzipan that sits in the middle of the cake. It's chewy, and what that texture does is it lingers around the mouth and means that you keep tasting it. I can still taste it now, having swallowed it, what, 30 seconds ago? There's so much going on in it. It's absolutely amazing. I'm getting chocolate as well. It's almost like there's dark chocolate chips studded within that Stollen cake. It's like night and day to the DiSaronno. Okay, so let's now look at the Adriatico. I've got a squeaky chair. I don't know if you can hear the chair, but it needs oiling, and every time I'm moving around, it's not my bottom, it's the chair. So quite a darker color on this one. Now this is a lot drier on the nose. So as I said in the blurb, they're using less sugar than most amarettos. We also have this element of sea salt, and we've got cinnamon and cocoa and coffee in there as well. So on the nose, you could almost say this is more astringent than the Selitza and the DiSaronno. It's got a lot more going for it than on DiSaronno, but this isn't as soft. This is more of a nutty element to it. It noses drier. There's a little touch of an earthiness to it, like a really high cocoa dark chocolate. And for some people, I think this straight away on the nose might be a little bit too dry, because it's got a little bit of what would have been that acetatey note, but it's just this side of dry nuts rather than nail polish remover. But I think some people might nose this and go, oh, it noses a bit harsh. And I can kind of understand that, because this is very much a drier amaretto. Okay, so let's see what it's like on the palate. So straight away, on the lips, tip of the tongue, saltiness, and it kind of travels to the sides of the mouth. Lovely coffee feel to this. And then as I've swallowed, the after effects is, ooh, it's like when you eat almonds that have still got that brown, dark brown skin over it. So they've not been, it's not the shells of the almonds, but you can get you can buy packs of almonds that have got like the brown skin around it, which is slightly more bitter, but still kind of soft at the same time. It's very much like you've just eaten a couple of natural almonds whole on its own. The saltiness works really well. That kind of almond skin note. So it definitely is drier. For me, and this is kind of based on the other times that I've tried it as well, this is less an amaretto to drink on its own for a lot of people. This is less a liqueur to drink on its own for something sweet after dinner. This works brilliantly in cocktails. Amaretto sour with that slightly salty note as well, and the slightly drier edge, amazing. Godfather, you do need to play around with the other spirit that you put with it. It won't work with every cognac, it won't work with every whiskey. But when you get the right whiskey, so it works particularly well with a slightly spicy rye whiskey, and a cognac, it needs to have something with a bit of heft to it, but it takes it to a whole other level. And that's what I really, really like about the Adriatico, is it's doing something different with it. It's a little bit more unusual, but I absolutely appreciate that this is not necessarily for everybody. This is not a classic Americano, amaretto, in any way, shape or form. This is really kind of taking an amaretto and just doing something slightly different with it. That saltiness, that dryness is not gonna be to everybody's taste. If you want the classic amaretto, the Selizia is absolutely the one, because it takes what is DiSaronno and just ramps everything up to 11. This ramps everything up to 11, but goes in a different direction. It's probably not what everybody wants. I love that burst of salt to start with. And then there's raisins. It's not a stollen cake, but there is like raisins and almost kind of grapes. There's a freshness to it. There's a sprightliness to it. There's almost a juicy feel to it as well. And then the finish is more of the residue of having eaten some almonds that have got that brown skin on it. Now, I'm going to go back to the DiSaronno. Again, no water in between, everything like that. I just want to know how this then compares. I'm going to put a little bit touch more. I want to know how this compares, having gone back, having tried two that clearly have more going on. Much more complexity, much more interest, depth, finish, the whole lot. So let's see what we are now looking at in terms of DiSaronno. So on the nose, I'm getting less of that marzipan effect now, and much more of just a astringent. So whereas the Adriatico, as I said, it has a slightly bitter note on the nose, but it's nuts rather than nail polish remover. This is nail polish remover rather than nuts. It's really quite sharp on the nose. It's not unpleasant, but it's one of those things that when you notice it, that's it, It can't be unseen, it can't be unnosed. Once you notice it's there, that's it. That's all you're gonna pick up is, that's all I can smell now is bloody nail polish remover. And if I get too close and take too big of a sniff, my eyes start to water a little bit. And this is 28%, so it's not that alcohol content, it's just the balance of it, that acetate note that's there. Right, and on the palate, I think it's the texture. It just feels like it's been watered down. It feels light and watery and thin. I get a little bit of chocolate. I get a bit more of the marzipan note that I didn't when I first tried it, but that could be, it's just residue of Salica and Adriatico that are then, this is following it. I get a little bit more flavour than I did the first time around, but not a huge amount, to be perfectly honest. There's still not a huge amount going on in there. The finish practically dies off, and what finishes there is essentially sugar solution. I really feel like I've just taken a drink of simple syrup with maybe a touch, as I said earlier, maybe a touch of orgeat. There is the merest hint of some kind of almond, marzipan, nutty note going on, but it's just overriding sugar and very, very little else, but kind of watered down simple syrup. You know, like almost like a 3-to-1, as in 1 to 3, then 1 part sugar, 3 parts water or more, even bigger ratio than that. It's light and slightly wishy-washy. It's just, but it's one of those things that when you try it side by side, that's where the difference is absolutely apparent. And that's the reason why I want to do some videos going forward where it's, right, here's the mainstream, the mass produced, the ones that you can get for £12 a litre and all this lot. Let's look at it directly compared to premium, whatever you want to call it, small batch, craft, anything like that. But what is the difference? You know, is there a difference? And, you know, it does a job, DiSaronno. You know, they make a shitload of it and it does a job. It gives you a bit of a sweet marzipan-y feel. You can bang it in a coffee, you can bang it in a tiramisu, and it does just enough to kind of go there. But if you like amaretto neat, or if you want a really, really good cocktail where you want to taste the amaretto, because DiSaronno is going to get lost in a Godfather. Whatever else you put with it, with whiskey or cognac or anything like that, that will dominate the DiSaronno. You're going to get a slight underlying note of a touch of almonds. Whereas if you do it with Salica, you're going to get much more richness and texture and depth. And if you put it with Adriatico, you're going to get this slightly saltiness and you're going to get its dryness. And like I say, it won't necessarily work with every cognac and every whiskey, but I reckon an Adriatico Amaretto, I reckon that makes a better Godfather, a more interesting Godfather than Salica would. Salica is the one for me to drink neat. Put the bottle in the freezer, put the bottle in the fridge, don't bother with ice, chill the glass if you want in the freezer to get it nice and frosted, and then have that after dinner. If you want to bang it in your coffee, then yeah, go with DiSaronno because you're just going to get the hint. But drinking it neat, it's not night and day, but there is a vast difference. DiSaronno tastes like Salica that's been diluted down. And that's the difference. That really is it. So hopefully that's been a bit of an education. So as I say, the Salica and the Adriatico, both of which are absolutely gorgeous bottles as well. I think they're beautiful bottles. Both available from me, yours truly. I do have some available to sample if you want to come in the shop and try them. And I do have still a little bit left of the miniature. Now, like I say, what I might do is I might get hold of the Lazzaroni and see if I can find some other amarettos, or if people watching actually want to send me some samples of just that'll do, and I can do literally an amaretto face-off part 2 where we do 6 or 7 or 8 all in a row. Then, you know, if you want to come in the shop and try it, I've still got the DiSaronno and I've got the others available to try. But if you do want to buy it, it's available through the website, www.spiritspecialist.com. They are both the same price at $29.99, and I highly recommend them, as is probably quite obvious after you watching this video. So that's me done, and I shall see you at the next one. Cheers.